Yo, every time I'm thinking I'm out, you guys keep pulling me in. Now, I'm not going to start this video on my traditional intro. I will say this. I am going to re-upload and explain once again the truth behind the Weapon Wheel podcast and the Big Gamer Small Talk podcast. Why these two podcasts have bad history and bad blood with one another, and why I feel like these two podcasts will not collaborate in any type of level. All right. Now, a lot of people watch my previous video. You guys commented, and I can tell from the comments, you guys did not watch the whole entire video. All right. You guys pretty much watched a minute's worth, maybe 2 minutes worth. Then you formed your opinion on that particular topic. So I suggest you guys listen to this whole video. I'm about to break it down very slowly, and I'm going to rename this why the truth behind why there's tension and issues with the Weapon Wheel podcast and the Big Gamer Small Talk podcast, the Dummies Edition. All right. Now, I noticed in the comment section in that particular video, there was a lot of people that I don't have an issue with anyone disagreeing with me or agreeing with me, but get your facts together. Don't say something that I did not say in that particular video. Now, if anyone does this in this particular video, and I know for a fact that they did not watch the video, then I am going to block you. All right. We cannot have people on YouTube spreading false and misleading information. All right. Now we're going in several levels and several different subjects about this particular story. I'm going to tell you why Zaire and Hard 8 Times have issues with one another. I'm going to go into about certain members on the Weapon Wheel podcast and the Big Gamer Small Talk podcast, and why these two podcasts will not be able to collaborate. And then I'm going to break it down on a society level, all right? And how this plays with us as African Americans, all right? Now I'm about to go into all these subjects, so get ready. Here we go, all right? Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the story between Hard 8 Times and Zaire, all right? Like it or not, love it or hate it, Zaire he was a fan of Hard 8 Times. He was so much of a fan of Hard 8 Times that Hard 8 Times got him on one of the Skype call sessions, and then he became a regular of these quote-unquote Skype wars, all right? And basically in these Skype calls, which they recorded to YouTube, basically they would be ragging on one another, bragging and boasting who's got the biggest dick in YouTube, this, that, and the third, and also gaming topics, all right? So in this particular Skype call session, coming from Zaire's own video and own mouth, he basically explained a situation where Hard 8 Times and the other members of this Skype call session did not know that Zaire did not log out of one of these Skype call sessions. And he heard Hard 8 Times as well as the other members talk about him and talk about his family and talked about the situation that Zaire got himself caught up in when everyone was calling him a pedophile. Basically, getting everyone to watch this underage porn video. All right. Now, to be fair and to be honest on Zaire, to be respectful on his side of things, he claims the reason why he was, giving everybody the link to this porn video is because he was trying to figure out a way to get it off the internet. All right. That's just to be fair and to be honest. That's what he's claiming he was trying to do. All right. But Hard Eight Times, and as well as the rest of the guys that was in that Skype call session, did not believe it, and a lot of people did not believe it. All right. Not only that, Zaire would constantly upload videos, and he made it a smearing campaign, if you want to call it a smearing campaign, against Hard Eight Times, basically trying to shame Hard Eight Time, talk about the time when Hard Eight Time was locked up and incarcerated. He made a couple of videos about that, which, to be also fair and to be honest, Zaire would not know about Hard Eight Times being incarcerated if Hard Eight Times did not say it in one of his videos. All right. It's something that he was not proud about, but it was a story he wanted to bring out to the masses of YouTube to basically get people an understanding about him and the temptations out there to where, hey, yo, don't fall in the same pits and fall in the same holes I did. You know, this is what happened to me. This could happen to you. It was basically a learning experiment. All right. The Life Behind Bars series that Hard Eight Times created. All right. So Zaire was talking about one story in particular when Hard Eight Times was incarcerated, where Hard Eight Times was there was some other guys in this prison facility, and they was going to fight Hard Eight Times. So Hard Eight Times talked about the incident, how he had to figure out a way to get out of this situation, and he had to pull on the guy's dick. All right. And Zaire talked about that issue, basically saying that Hard Eight Times is so weak that he's grabbing on men's penises, and he's also gay. All right. He was on this smearing campaign against Hard Eight Times. So these two individuals would upload videos about one another. Zaire will upload a video about Hard Eight Times. Hard Eight Times would retaliate on Zaire. Now, when they was going back and forth, it only made Zaire's channel popular. All right. He started getting a lot of views and a lot of subscribers to join his channel, because, like it or not, there are people out there that just don't like Hard Eight Times. So when someone says something negative about Hard Eight Times or disagree with Hard Eight Times, people would join their channel because they felt like those individuals couldn't stand Hard Eight Times. Like they can't stand Hard Eight Times. All right. So that's why there's bad tension and a bad history with those two individuals, and it's never going to change. All right. They're not going to bury the hatchet. Stuff has been said in particular Skype calls, podcasts, and videos that are not going away. You cannot apologize enough. If Zaire really wanted to, he could not apologize enough to make Hard Eight Times, basically accept his apology. All right. And vice versa. A lot of things were said between those two individuals. All right. So to make matters even worse, you got Zaire and Hard Eight Times. You got that issue plaguing on your shoulders. Not to mention, you have certain individuals from the Big Gamer Small Talk podcast pretty much spreading lies and false information out there to the YouTube gaming community. All right. And for an example, if you need an example, you had Crap Gamer reviewing games he never played in his life, stealing the game footage from other YouTube channels and saying that he played these games, so he's going to give you guys a review. He lied about those games. All right. You also had Iron Wolf claiming that the Xbox One was going to be as powerful as 2 Titans. All right. Let me repeat that. Iron Wolf said that the Xbox One was going to be as powerful as 2 Titans. You had Mooch pretty much stalking consumers at Best Buy and GameStop, all right? This made the Xbox community look very bad and very shameful, all right? And they pretty much been shunned away from the Xbox community. And to make matters even worse for the Big Gamer Small Talk podcast, Xbox as a corporation, Phil Spencer has pretty much blocked these individuals from social media, all right? So you got the Xbox community not too pleased and happy with the individuals at the Big Gamer Small Talk podcast. You also have Xbox as a corporation, Phil Spencer, pretty much shunning away these individuals, balling them out of the good graces of Microsoft as a corporation. All right. Now, I remember Hard 8 Times and Black Bond try to extend an olive branch to Big Gamer Small Talk podcast, basically saying, why don't we debate and see who knows what and settle the score once and for all? But you have to remember, 5 years ago, the Big Gamer Small Talk podcast, they were getting their views. They were getting their subscriber base. So it would have been considered bad business for those members on the Big Gamer Small Talk podcast. They were not going to get anything out of it or from it. So they pretty much, as far as trying to allow individuals from the Weapon Wheel podcast to appear on the Big Gamer Small Talk podcast, that wasn't even happening. All right. Now, when you fast forward to today, the Big Gamer Small Talk podcast is in dire straits. All right. They lost 2 of their founding members. Mooch is pretty much exiled from the YouTube community because of an incident that happened to him where recently he could have lost his job. That's why he's no longer uploading videos on YouTube. And Iron Wolf pretty much saw the writing on the wall and escaped from the ship because he knew the ship will be sinking. All right. Now Iron Wolf, he's a PlayStation 4 fan. All right. And Zaire and the other individuals from the Big Gamer Small Talk pretty much discredit Iron Wolf because he purchased a PlayStation 4 Pro, but it was okay for Crap Gamer to buy one. It was okay for Zaire to buy one. But when Iron Wolf does it, now it's a problem. Now it's an issue. All right. So as far as will we ever see a collaboration with the Big Gamer Small Talk podcast and the Weapon Wheel podcast, that will never happen or take place because of 2 reasons. One, the Weapon Wheel podcast is at a position where if they even are going to consider this, this is not going to benefit the Weapon Wheel podcast. All right. If anything, it's going to benefit the Big Gamer Small Talk podcast. And 2, the Big Gamer Small Talk podcast don't even want this to come in to fruition because of all the outlandish and fuckery shit that this podcast has been saying for the past couple of years. Just for the past couple of years, they're not going to be able to overcome. All right. This will be really career suicide and podcast suicide if they even accept the terms of agreements from the Weapon Wheel podcast. All right. If they do what the Weapon Wheel podcast asked them to do, was to show their achievements, show their trophies, that's going to expose them even more than them actually doing a podcast with the Weapon Wheel podcast. And they're going to have to address the elephant in the room. They're going to have to address the questions that's going to be thrown to them, and they're going to have to respond with an answer. All right. They can't just sidestep and dance away from these particular questions. All right. It's going to make them look really bad, really stupid, really pathetic, and it's bad for business on their side of things. All right. That's why I don't see a collaboration with either podcast. It will be considered career suicide for the Big Gamer Small Talk podcast. And as far as the Weapon Wheel podcast go, they're not going to get anything from this. All right, they're not going to get any more extra exposure than they already have. This podcast is growing by the days, by the weeks, by the months, by the years. All right, just if they do their own thing, they're going to be fine. This podcast is going to get even better and even more successful. All right. But when you break it all down and you take it to another level and you look at it through the eyes of an African American male in the African American community, all right, and you look at the whole picture as a whole instead of one piece of the puzzle, this doesn't look good to us as African Americans. And I'm about to explain why. If you take away the tension between Hard 8 Times and Zaire, if you take away all the lies and false information that certain individuals on the Big Gamer Small Talk podcast has spewed out, all right, and if you take away BG, which I'm going to tell you guys straight up, BG really stepped to the plate. He really stepped like a man, and he handled the situation the best he could on his side of things. All right. When you peel away all of that, you have two podcasts, two very successful podcasts, by the way. And like it or not, love it or hate it, when you say the Big Gamer Small Talk podcast, the first name that comes jumping out of your mouth is Zaire, all right? And when you say the Weapon Wheel podcast, the first name that ultimately comes leaking out of your mouth is BG, all right? And this whole situation make us look bad because you have two very successful podcasts that were founded by African American males, all right? Now, I'm not saying it's a disgrace. I'm not saying that this really makes us look bad more than anything else. I'm just saying that by these two podcasts not working with one another, and I know the reasons why these two podcasts cannot work with one another. Don't get this shit twisted. I know the history. I just told you guys the fucking history, all right? But by having two successful podcasts and they're not collaborating with one another, and you see all these other podcasts that are created and founded by other nationalities, and even though they may have disagreements with one another, they seem to bury the hatchet and they can work with one another. This simply doesn't make us look good. Now, is it the worst thing as an African American male in the African American community that we can't overcome? Is this going to overshadow all the other great stuff we do? Hell to the two fucks no. This is just a small blimp when you look at it, all right? I'm not saying it's that big of a deal. I'm just saying it really doesn't make us look good, because the two shining examples, when you go into YouTube, the two shining examples of successful podcasts that were founded by African American males happen to be the two podcasts that not only were created and formed by an African American male, but there's bad tension, drama, a bad history with both of these podcasts. All right. Now, to be fair, BG has tried several attempts to make this work out with the other podcast. Hard 8 Times has also tried. All right. Black Bond has also tried. It's a shame that we couldn't get Zaire to at least try to make this work, all right? And I understand the history in the background. I understand all that. I understand what you claim that Hard Eight Times said, but how did that spill over to BG? I mean, it's just sad when you really look at things that way, all right? Now, I went on and on and on. I explained to you guys in full detail. I even broke a lot of things down. If you're still here watching this particular video, I told you guys the history not only of the two individuals, but the two podcasts. And I gave you guys my opinion on, as far as when you break it down in the African American community, how this doesn't make us look good. All right. There are several examples in our African American culture that we can look at and view and say, okay, if those two individuals could have figured out a way to work with one another, they wouldn't have spent so much time destroying one another. All right. If you are a hip hop fan, just imagine what the hip hop community would still be if you had Death Row still running things and collaborating with Bad Boy Entertainment. All right. Just imagine if those two studios, those two companies were collaborating with one another. All right. They would be, if not bigger, but as big as Motown when Motown was big back in the day. All right. It's, when I look at things like that, it's just amazing to me when you have two successful industries that were founded by African Americans, or when you have two successful African Americans doing their thing, and you come to a point where you would like to see them collaborate, and we can still appreciate those two individuals, those two companies. It's a shame that when you look at things, only one of them can still be standing. All right. And as of right now, the Weapon Wheel podcast is alive and is in full effect. It's not going anywhere. It's only getting bigger and better. All right. And when you look at the Big Gamer Small Talk podcast, it's deteriorating. All right. It's not as what it once was 5 years ago. It's taking a seat back. All right. So we have to look at things like that, all right? But guys, tell me what you think. Rate, comment, subscribe. It's your boy. I'm Chris the Don One, and I am here.